All right, we are now live with Diane Hall. Diane Hall is Diane Hall is the president of the Warren Astronomical Society. Diane Hall is the president of the Warren Astronomical Society. And she has a program on astronomy.fm, the Space Pirate Radio. And she has a program on astronomy.fm, the Space Pirate Radio. Okay. And take it away, Diane. I've said too much.
All right, fabulous. Thank you so much, John. It's great to be back at Astronomy at the Beach. My colleague Bob Tremblay, who's the
Thank you so much, John. It's great to
Warren
be back at Astronomy at the Beach.
Warren Astronomical Society Outreach
so,
Chair.
I
I think you'll need to mute your YouTube, John.
Warren
Awesome.
Astronomical Society Outreach Chair. I think you'll need to mute your YouTube, John.
Yes, I'm looking for a way to do that. Here we go.
I turned it down inside the browser.
I think you'll need to mute your YouTube, John.
Yes, I'm looking for a way to do that. Here we go.
I turned it down inside the browser.
Okay.
Test check, test check.
Test check, test check.
I can hear you just fine.
Test check, test check.
I think you'll need to kill your mic or kill your speaker or something. I know. Test check, test check. All right. So it's great to be back at Astronomy at the Beach. I'd like to give a shout out to my colleague Bob Tremblay for inviting me to do a presentation on binocular astronomy because
It's great to be back at Astronomy.
before I was known as the, Russian rocket program person or the shuttle hugger person at the WAS, I was the binocular astronomy person, or rather a very zealous binocular astronomy person among several. So why binocular astronomy? Well, it can be summed up in a very pithy phrase that's been used by many of us out there, including Phil Harrington, who used to write a binocular astronomy column for Astronomy magazine. 2 eyes are better than one. So, what is the best gift that you buy a Michigan astronomer? Because, of course, we are a Michigan tradition here. GLAAC is, and Astronomy at the Beaches specifically, even though this year we are anticipating people from all over the world tuning in for our first ever online event. But Michigan has some barriers to astronomy. So Michigan is a low-lying, inland, heavily populated in the south, and suffers from turbulence from the jet stream, even on a good night, a clear night. So what is the best gift you can buy a Michigan astronomer? And no, not a one-way trip to Mars. Well, my spouse and observing partner, Jonathan, gives the answer a tank of gas. Because as you can see from this light pollution map, Detroit, where I and many, Michiganders live, is this red and white blotch in the light pollution map, signifying our skies are very, very bad. Not quite Chicagoland bad, but bad. And yet, if you travel northbound, 2 hours up into the thumb of Michigan, the peninsula jutting out into Lake Huron, or 4 hours into the north of the lower peninsula, or a solid 8 hours into the upper peninsula, you find truly dark skies. Dark as you can get east of the Rockies. Well, my standard answer, on the other hand, complements Jonathan's answer. I say you get an astronomer a pair of good binoculars. Now, why is that? 2 eyes are better than one. But if you're not convinced by that pithy statement, we have our reasons. So number one, as it goes with the tank of gas, binoculars are portable. Here I am with Jonathan standing 10,000 feet up at the summit of Haleakala Mountain in Science City on Maui, and I've got my binoculars. Binoculars are, with some exceptions, handheld. You just carry them into the field. You have a carrying case, you have a strap, you can tuck them into a little backpack, you can ride around with them in your car. They can be everywhere you need to be with very little trouble, which is not something you can say of a beginner telescope, like, say, the Orion XT8, an 8-inch reflector that is a great beginner telescope, but maybe not the perfect beginner instrument. So with a pair of binoculars, even 10,000 feet above sea level, you are ready to go. Then, binoculars are all in one. I'm clumsy. I get nervous about eyepieces, which can be hundreds of dollars. Telescopes and eyepieces are a bit of a razor and blades model. Maybe a good telescope costs you $400, $500, $600. A full case of eyepieces could be 2 or 3 times that. That's a lot of money invested in little pieces of very fragile glass that, if you drop them, might never be the same. So there's no extra eyepieces to buy with a binocular, and there's no extra eyepieces to struggle with in the dark, where dropping something, best you're not going to find it for a while, at worst it'll never be the same again. Also, whereas a telescope needs a mount unless you're doing the pirate spyglass deal, binoculars don't need a mount. It's a quick and easy setup. They're around your neck. You point them, you focus them, you're good. And binoculars are versatile. Astronomy is a hobby that dovetails beautifully with other hobbies, especially here in Michigan, where we have such a wealth of nature to observe. Great Lakes freighters, vintage planes, monarch migration, the bird migration coming up through Michigan, like this beautiful little grosbeak I saw earlier this year. Binoculars work perfectly with any of these hobbies: birding, plane watching, boat watching. Here in Michigan, or right across the border in Canada, we have true dark sky sites like Neguagon State Park in northern lower peninsula of Michigan, about 4 hours north of Detroit. Point Pelee National Park in Canada, which is one of the best sites for viewing the spring and fall migration of wildlife in the continent. And a good pair of binoculars will put you in ideal shape for any kind of weekend trip. Maybe it's cloudy. That's cool. Watch birds. For the birds, well, might not be too windy for astronomy. You will have a good time either way. And they are the best way to view some objects. Not everything looks better in a telescope. Not everything looks better under high magnification. Using both eyes allows more light in, which we'll talk about shortly. More light means a better image, roughly. And the wide barrels of a pair of binoculars are ideal for large objects. So, how do binoculars work? It's surprisingly complicated. They have a lot going on under a fairly elegantly packaged skin, shall we say. But first off, binoculars work because our eyes work. So how do our eyes work? Well, we have structures in our eyes called rods and cones. Rods detect light. Cones detect color. Most of us have 3 different kinds of cones that have red, green, blue color vision. Some people have differing cones and see color a bit differently, but that upshot is rods are for light, cones are for color. When we let our eyes fully adjust to the dark, a chemical called visual purple, or rhodopsin is the technical term, actually builds up in our eyes over the course of 20 to 30 minutes and helps our rods to see better. Our color vision basically shuts down. Our eyes switch over to dark mode, looking purely for light, which generally registers as white. And we see more acutely, but with less color. Now, a blast of white light in your eyes, say you're standing in the field looking through a telescope and then some headlights come by and, well, then you can't see again for about 20 minutes. White light depletes the visual purple, and then it takes about 20 minutes to build up again, if not longer. That's why astronomers carry red flashlights around instead of white ones. If you're trying to see in the dark, red light is your friend, and white, and especially green and blue, it's a bit troublesome. So please don't bring out blue LEDs to a star party. So just as our eyes have a lens to focus light on the retina at the back of our eye, which in some cases, like me, I wear corrective lenses, they don't do the best job and they need a bit of help. Binoculars and telescopes use glass optics to basically make our eyes bigger. The average adult has a pupil, which is the part of your eye that lets in light. It's about 5 millimeters wide, maybe a little smaller. Optics act like extensions of your eye. So a pair of 10 by 50 binoculars turns your 5 millimeter pupils into 50 millimeter pupils with an additional 10 power magnification. That's pretty impressive. And when you look at a truly large telescope, like say a 24-inch reflecting telescope, which is not impossible to access here in Michigan, that's like having an eye that's 2 feet across, letting in light. That's pretty cool. So, how do binoculars specifically work? It's very intricate in there. There are 2 main designs of binoculars, the roof prism design and the poro prism design. The roof looks simpler. It's all in a straight line. It's actually said to be harder to construct precisely. The poro is staggered and they're a bit clunkier, but they're supposedly easier to make. So you can get into very long-winded debates about whether the roof or the poro is better. Really, if you're just starting out as an astronomer or a birder or a plane watcher, it doesn't matter. You don't need to get into the weeds on this. Suffice it to say, there's a lot of glass in there. It has to be very precise, and the higher quality these prisms are, the better the quality of your image. But you don't have to get the most expensive thing on the market in order to have a really good time with a pair of binoculars, as we'll see right now. So, how much should you spend on your first pair of good binoculars? Not as much as you're probably thinking you might have to. My first pair of real binoculars were actually my mother's. I borrowed them a lot. They were made by a brand called Tasco, pretty common brand, easily available in the US. I think they were a 10 by 30 power. I thought they were great, but I was 7 years old and I was used to literal toy binoculars with 1 magnification, 2 magnification, basically useless. When I tried to use these same Tascos as an adult, they weren't that great. So what's better than a pair of Tascos you can get from a big box store or a chain drugstore that won't break the bank? Rather a lot, actually. So Orion Meade, and Celestron are three of the big name astronomy brands available here in the US. We'll talk extensively about a couple of them because they offer products that I think are actually really quite good for people just getting into the hobby or getting back into the hobby after maybe letting go dormant for 20 years. Orion used to offer an astronomy beginner's pack featuring as its centerpiece this pair of 10 by 50 binoculars. Again, 10 power magnification, 50 millimeter barrels to let your eyes turn from 5 millimeter pupils into 50 millimeter pupils each. These binoculars alone cost $99 with free shipping right from the manufacturer. They're designed to be ideal for both long distance viewing on Earth. So again, freighter watching on the Great Lakes, and for astronomy. Some people start off with 10 by 30 binoculars, which are a little more compact. I find the extra 20 millimeters of aperture per barrel really matters. 10 by 30 just doesn't feel fun to me. 10 by 50, even 10 by 42, it's pretty comfortable. I'm having a good time. So in other words, this pair of binoculars is an awesome place to start. 10 by 50 wide angle, bird watching, plane watching, sky whatever. You can have a good time with these. But I like a little more aperture, especially for a true dark sky. So this is my favorite pair of binoculars in the world. I've been through at least 4 different ones because accidents happen in the field. These are 15 by 70s, so that's 15 power with 70 millimeter barrels. For comparison, one of my actual refractor telescopes only has a 66 millimeter barrel. So looking through these is like having 2 handheld telescopes right there. They cost all of $93.95 from the manufacturer, are relatively lightweight despite their size, and can see a very wide range of objects. Are they the best optics available on the market? No, or they wouldn't be $93. Point is, you don't need the best optics on the market. The point is, this is a really good deal. Now, they are a little more bulky and a little more fragile, which is why I've gone through 4 of them. But if you're not being careless at 2 in the morning, you can probably make out and keep these in shape for a really long time. So when I make reference to observing with binoculars, generally speaking, this is the pair I'm talking about. Now, you can go in the other direction. Orion also makes these little guys. 2 power, 54 millimeter barrels, ultra wides. They are very small, very portable, very cute, but they only magnify the sky 2 times over. Now, why would you like that? Because it's fun, actually. You can learn the sky if you've not really studied a true dark sky in your life because you've lived all your life under light pollution. It can be a little disorienting. It's very difficult to simply go out to a dark sky site for the first time in your life with a telescope or a pair of binoculars and just go wild. The first time I was in Upper Ontario, darkest skies I'd been in a decade, I could pick out exactly 7 stars in the sky, the 7 stars of the Big Dipper. Everything else was drowned out by tiny, tiny stars that I hadn't seen in years. I didn't know their names. I didn't know what constellations they all belonged to. It was disorienting. A little pair of binoculars like this at low magnification really can help you learn the sky intimately and immersively and just flat out be fun. Now, the drawback is this is 2 chunks of very good glass in there. They cost a bit more than the standard binoculars. These, despite their small size, are actually $149 right now. So if you only have enough in your budget for 1 pair of binoculars, I really wouldn't start here. I would start with the 10 by 50s or maybe the 15 by 70s. if you already have a pair of 10 by 50s or 8 by 40s or something like that you're pretty comfortable with, add this to your arsenal. It'll be fun. Then we have the upper end of the market. And by upper end, I mean spending. Image stabilized binoculars can give you a fine, steady, sharp image. This particular pair from Canon, they're 14 by 32. So a little bit smaller in aperture than the astronomy binoculars we were just talking about. They were rated best for the money by birdingsiteworldbirds.org, which is a place I go to do binocular research. The problem is that the money involved is a whopping $1,299 American. Unless you're an expert birder or a photographer looking to branch out into astronomy, you don't need these. You really don't need a $1,300 pair of binoculars. This is like a wish list sort of thing for me, but just really $100, $150, you'll be fine. So another thing that you can do when there's not a plague raging is join an astronomy club, make friends with fellow astronomers, and borrow one another's pieces of equipment. That is a great way to decide what is really best for you, because some binoculars are just more comfortable for people to use with their glasses on. Some are really not ideal for people to use with glasses, and just they suit you better if you have your glasses off. And everybody's different. My spouse and I we both have corrective lenses. We both have slightly different needs when it comes to what we're comfortable with in viewing through binoculars. So you can have a friend or a loved one who swears by their favorite pair of binoculars, and you try them out and you hate them. Your eyes are your own eyes. So while COVID-19 has made swapping out equipment not recommended, which is why we are doing this as a virtual event in the first place, hopefully one day that'll be an option again, and you can hang out with fellow astronomers and find out who's got the best pair of binoculars around. And if you're lucky, they might sell them to you for a song. So astronomers get asked a lot, how far can you see with that? Since distance outside the solar system is measured in light years, the answers could get pretty interesting and funny. But okay, let's be serious. What can we see with a good pair of 10 by 50 or 15 by 70 binoculars? Well, for a start, our moon. It's up there a lot. It's actually pretty cool. And as the first thing you look at, it has its drawbacks because it's really bright and actually will hurt your dark adaptation. But, if you have a crescent moon or a fairly small dim moon, or it's down there on the horizon, it's also a great way to test your focus, because binoculars can be a little tricky. They've got a main focus in the center. Each individual eyepiece might have its own fine focus that you can tweak. If, like me, you have slightly different prescriptions in each eye. So moon's a good place to start. If the moon looks great, crystal clear, shadows, craters, the streaks that you can see radiating out from the massive crater on the southern end of the moon, everything else is going to look pretty good. Besides that, the moon, other than a full moon, which is actually not very interesting, it has its own rewards as an object. This is front and center there in a picture taken by a colleague from the Warren Astronomical Society, is this beautiful half crater called the Bay of Rainbows. And since the moon rotates in 28 days, basically a lunar month, you see a slightly different view every night. And the Bay of Rainbows will look like this basically once a month. Since the moon wobbles a little bit in its revolutions around the Earth, you may also get to see periodically little bits of the moon that creep into view, that are right at the edge, that are otherwise hidden. And sometimes you may come across a feature that takes months to come back around. So the moon is definitely there's a lot going on for a quote unquote dead world, thanks to the interplay of light and shadow and gravity. course, there's also planets. King of planets, Jupiter, very prominent right now in the early evening sky, is a great target for binoculars. It's the largest in our solar system, and it has 4 large moons, 2 of which you can see here in a picture from another Warren Astronomical Society colleague. They are seen easily in binoculars, and over the course of several days, you can see the moons dance. They go in front of Jupiter, they go behind Jupiter. Sometimes the outermost of them, Callisto, goes above or behind Jupiter because its plane of orbit is a little out of sync with the rest. And of course, sometimes you get to see the great red spot rotate into view. Jupiter takes about 10 hours to go around on its axis. And so over the course of an evening, you may see Jupiter a little bit differently from the time that you set up to the time that you pack it in and go to bed. So Jupiter is a deeply rewarding object and one of the first things that you should turn your binoculars on if you have the chance. After Jupiter in the solar system, of course, we've got Saturn. Now, back at the dawn of optically aided astronomy, when the Italian astronomer Galileo Galilei looked at Saturn through a telescope for the first time in recorded history, he noticed something was funny. He said initially it was ears and later decided it might be arms, but he made these sketches that you can see there on the left because Saturn just was weird. But Galileo's telescope was not very powerful. It was less powerful than almost any pair of binoculars that you're going to be able to access these days with probably worse optics. And so through a telescope, you may see Saturn looking a little American football shaped or maybe having ears, but given the right conditions of a good steady sky and steady hands, you may well see the rings. And you may see some of its moons, including its largest moon, Titan, which, of course, is a fabulous little world with a methane cycle of rain and slush and evaporation like a alternate Earth. So Saturn is definitely up there on the list of things you should look at. Now, we can't depend on them, but when they do come through, they're quite rewarding. Comets. We had Comet Neowise gracing the skies here in late spring and early summer. It never became the great comet that many of us hoped it would be initially, a blazing in the sky to the unaided eye, you know, making people step outside of their homes or their offices go, what's that? But it was still a real treat for astronomers who observed it with binoculars. We could see its streaming tail, or rather 2 tails, a pale blue ion tail and a glowing white dust tail, just like veteran astronomers back in the 60s and 70s could see on the classic comets like Bennett and West and even Kohoutek that resulted in these fabulous old school pictures. So if a comet comes around, you can have rewarding times for weeks, if not months, with a good pair of binoculars. My 15 by 70s were a favorite device to take a look at Comet Neowise with. Now, sometimes you get an unconventional comet like this one, Comet Holmes, which was head on. The tail wasn't going out. Instead, from Earth, from our perspective here on Earth, it turned into a giant puffball. But to the unaided eye, it simply looked like a new star had appeared in the northeastern sky in the constellation of Perseus back in 2008. When you turned binoculars on it, you saw this fabulous glowing puff of vapor, pale green to the eye. It was a wonderful binocular object. So not a classic comet, not a great comet with a capital G, but a wonderful thing to see in binoculars. Now, switching to things that are a little less transient and a little farther afield, I think everybody's heard of this one. M45 is a star cluster in the constellation Taurus, better known as the Pleiades or the Seven Sisters, or for the Japanese, Subaru. It is the classic binocular object. It is best enjoyed with a wide field and low magnification so you get the full impact of its glittering blue stars. Fits beautifully in a binocular field, and you can see the intense color of those young, newly formed stars. If you turn up the magnification in a telescope, you just kind of lose the order, the patterns, the mystique that make the Pleiades so special. So with binoculars, you also see easily that there's dozens upon dozens, even up to 150 stars rather than 7. But nonetheless, the poetry of the Seven Sisters comes through beautifully in a pair of binoculars. Another star cluster known to the ancients, variously called by different cultures the beehive, the manger, or the gate of men, is known to astronomers as M44. It graces the tiny zodiacal constellation Cancer, the crab, and it takes up so large a space that, again, zooming in close with a telescope just misses the point. But it does dazzle in binoculars. This is a spring object, so it's not available to us right now, but when it comes around again, it is deeply rewarding, especially in a dark sky site where you can just make out a little patch of light at the edge of your vision. You turn those binoculars on and you're rewarded with this field of glittering stars. Now, getting a little more exotic, the Great Orion Nebula is one of the classic binocular objects. The constellation of Orion the Hunter dominates the southern winter skies here in Michigan, and the fuzzy star in the center of the sword that hangs down from Orion's famous belt of 3 stars becomes a clear patch of glowing stellar gas and dust, not with the pink and blue tints that you can see in a photograph, but a bit green. And with higher magnification, or a really big pair of binoculars, you can make out the stars inside. Again, hot, young blue stars gleaming in the cloud. Just an absolute breathtaking sight. Something up right now is something that answers the question, how far can you see with those? Very easily. So with a large enough pair of binoculars and dark enough skies, you can spot galaxies outside our own that are 50, 60, almost 70 million light years away. Snapshots back in time, light that's literally taken 60 plus million years for the photons to land on your eye. But a mere 2 million miles away is this object that you can spot without trying very hard at all in just about any pair of binoculars, including the little ones that do 2 magnification, because with the dark enough sky, you can see this just fine with the unaided eye. It's the Great Galaxy of Andromeda, a massive spiral galaxy often thought of as the twin to the Milky Way. So large, it is outright difficult to capture properly in most eyepieces on a telescope. Take a while to observe it in a dark sky with your binoculars and just see how very far out it flows from the central disk, stretching off in either direction. You won't see any hint of its reddish color. Again, at night, you're seeing with the rods, so color is a bit hard to detect anyway. You'll see color in the planets and color in some stars. Galaxies will be white. And you may note its little companion galaxy, M32. Another nearby galaxy that's beautifully poised in the Michigan autumn, and therefore up right now, is called the pinwheel or triangulum, depending on the source you read. Astronomers make it easy and they call it M33. It's located in the small triangular constellation just below Andromeda. It's another big spiral that's our near neighbor in space, a little more than 2 million light years away, but it's facing us directly, hence the old appellation, the pinwheel. It needs a much darker sky to see than Andromeda, which is, you can't see its spiral nature so much with binoculars, but you can see it's very bright. This is dimmer and hazier and a little trickier to see, but it's something that I love to look at in dark autumn skies in my 15 by 70s. Not far at all from these two galaxies is an incredible sight. It looks like a bright patch in the Milky Way, like a knot tied into the fairly thin stream of the winter Milky Way. These two clusters, together they're called Caldwell 14, look their absolute best in binoculars. They're called the double cluster in Perseus. Nestled side by side, they remind me of a pair of snowballs. And I don't mean the snowballs you form out of packed snow and throw at people. I mean the pastry from the shop that is two coconut covered spheres in a package. I'm sorry, I like sweets, but every time I see this beautiful pair of star clusters together, I think snowballs. Anyway, they're visible right now in the constellation Perseus, between the head of the hero and the M of Cassiopeia, the queen. Now, those are fairly easy. Getting a little bit more out there, but very rewarding. We've got globular clusters. Globular clusters are big balls of stars packed into tight globes. Some of them may well be the cores of stripped down galaxies that were captured by the Milky Way. And the Milky Way vacuumed off all the glowing gas and dust in the star-forming bits and left these spheres of stars to die slowly as they orbit the galaxy. It's all very apocalyptic, but they're very pretty. And this is one of my favorites. It's called M22. The M's come from a catalog of astronomical objects compiled by a Frenchman named Messier back in the 1700s. M22 is in the constellation Sagittarius, which is low in the southern skies from Michigan, very low if you're in northern Michigan. It's located to the left of the dome of the Teapot in Sagittarius, and binoculars just reward you instantly by showing you this fuzzy patch in the sky. It'll take much higher magnification to see the stars like this with their colors of yellow and even red. But I love M22. I find it just a rewarding, beautiful thing to turn my binoculars on it and have it pop out at me. And I look forward to chasing it every year when it comes around in the summertime. Another ball of stars, this one bright and compact, is called M13. It's a little more of a challenge object in binoculars than M22 because it's smaller, but it's high in the Michigan sky for months in the spring and early summer, and is therefore available to you for a good chunk of the year to go looking at it. It's in the constellation Hercules. Once you know where to find it, you'll find it again and again, and it is a beautiful thing. So if you're tuning in from outside of Michigan, or you're able to travel south of the 42nd parallel, you may be able to see this magnificent object in the constellation Centaurus. It looks like a star, but the second you put binoculars on there, you see this celestial fuzzball, huge, bright, gorgeous. Again, you would need a full telescope to see all these amazing stars packed into the sphere. But Omega Centauri in binoculars is one of the prettiest sights you will ever see. I was fortunate enough to get a chance to see it this year before the plague really got rolling in the US and all the travel ban hit. So you definitely need to go south to see this next object. You have to be abroad, even from Hawaii at the southernmost point in the US. You either can't see it because things are not quite right, or the elevation's too low, or you can see a wisp of it from Haleakala and Maui. The Large Magellanic Cloud and its companion, the Small Magellanic Clouds, are, I have been told, phenomenal binocular objects. For me, they're on my bucket list. If you can see them, I envy you right now. I can't wait. Particularly because the Tarantula Nebula is the southern counterpart of the Great Nebula in Orion. And by many accounts, it blows the Orion Nebula away. It won't look like this in binoculars, of course, but I am told that the full scope of this huge, glowing, detailed cloud of gas and dust is just absolutely astonishing. Finally, you can see the sun in binoculars with the caveat. You need to buy or make a white light filter attachment for the end of your binocular barrel, which it can actually be quite simple. My spouse and I did it ourselves with some mylar that we got from Germany, not helium balloon mylar, astronomy grade mylar, and a cardboard collar. And we put it at the end of one of my pairs of 15 by 70 binoculars, and bingo, we had a impromptu 70 millimeter solar telescope, which we then took down to San Diego to see Venus pass in front of the sun. It worked real well. Now, you can't see fine details on the sun with a white light filter. You need a special telescope for that. But you can see sunspots, which the solar cycle has just picked up again. Hopefully there will be many years of sunspots in our future that would make a white light filter quite worth it. And when the planet Mercury crosses in front of the sun, as it will do a few more times this century, you'll be able to watch that in real time, which is really cool. So when you are using a white light filter on your binocular barrel, of course, always keep the other barrel completely covered. Never turn your binoculars on the sun under any other condition, because it will be catastrophic to all those lovely pieces of glass inside your binoculars, not to mention catastrophic to your eye or anything else that gets the receiving end of the beam that's gone through all of those prisms. And finally, you can enjoy the Milky Way itself. Those little 2-power binoculars from Orion would be especially good for that, but with any pair of binoculars, each glowing knot and dark patch in the Milky Way becomes a little mystery to unravel, like exploring a map. You go to a true dark sky side and you lay back on a blanket or a chair and just scan the Milky Way, summer or winter. It's one of the most rewarding things an astronomer can do. So, now that you know what you can do with binoculars, what else can you do? Well, astronomers like extras, gizmos, gadgets, add-ons. We collect things. That's how you end up in a hobby where you've got a telescope and then a lunchbox filled with a couple $100 in bits of glass. Binocular accessories are pretty easy, though. First off, you need a chair. To observe with binoculars, you really need a stable place to sit. You can lie on the ground. You can brace yourself in a wall. I've done all that. A tree, done that too. Mailbox, yep, done that. But really, you need a good outdoor chair. I picked this one just because I like the aesthetic, but, you know, 40, 50, 60 bucks American, a good, comfortable outdoor chair. You might even have one in the garage. So, a stable chair, a really flimsy lawn chair, not a good bet. If the chair is wiggly or jostly, you won't have a good time. You need something stable, then you got it made. Now, since astronomers do like their gadgets, there's a little industry of customized binocular chairs or directions on how to DIY one. I've never ordered one. This was used by family members of a great author of articles in Sky and Telescope magazine at the time. I have several friends who swear by their binocular chairs. Maybe one day. Again, I like to be portable and don't really want to be dragging a chair around if I don't have to. And if you really want to get serious about binocular astronomy, you will want to invest in a tripod, or better yet, what we call a parallel mount, where the binocular dangles off the end of the lever like this. Especially good if you want to use them for extremely precise viewing, or if you want to set them up and have other people look at them, like say you and your spouse or observing partner or the whole family are out together and you want to be able to everybody take a turn. Well, That is the drawback of binoculars. They're handheld. So if you can find an object and see it, your 6-year-old might not be able to. So you'll want something that will hold the binoculars in place for other people to look at. Drawback is these do get pricey. A good stable mount will set you back a bit, and a bad mount that's unstable is just not worth the money at all. Now, I'll tell you, I don't own a parallel mount like this yet, and I've been observing for 20 years, and I still haven't put in the investment. But I borrowed one once for an observing contest, and I came in second place against people with actual telescopes. So me, a parallel mount, and my 15x70 binoculars can do a really good job of finding stuff. We were up against some pretty impressive wide aperture telescopes, and they do the job. They're just not cheap. So, the binocular astronomer's budget, one pair of decent binoculars, let's say $100 American. One share might be free, maybe 65 bucks. One mount, optional. Only go there if you really mean it. 1 tank gas to a dark sky site and back from Michigan. Don't know your fuel efficiency, don't know what your gas station is, but let's say $30. $30 will get me quite a few places in my Ford. State park passport fee to get to the dark sky sites in Michigan, like Negwagon, Rockport, out in Jackson, the Hudson Lake. $12 to $17, depending on your vehicle or whether you buy it in advance or at the gate. Total? Well, for one thing, it's less than a good beginner's telescope like the Orion XT8. You have everything you need. You can use the leftover funds on really important stuff like warm socks and snacks. And overall, priceless. Binoculars, tank gas, dark sky sight. You will have a wonderful night. Almost guaranteed. What's the almost? Just some general observing tips if you've not been out doing that in quite some time. It's Michigan. Dress in layers. Gets cold, it gets windy, it gets wet. Once you are cold and wet, it is very hard to get warm and dry again, especially if you are out and about. So dress in layers, be careful, check the forecast. Stay safe. Observe safety rules in all public and private observing sites. You do not want to lose access to the really cool observing site that your astronomy club buddy knows because, something bad happened after tequila. Please invest in a red light LED flashlight because, again, that's for your own safety since it won't ruin your own night vision. It's for the safety of anybody else observing with you since it won't ruin their night vision. Be on the lookout for critters. Michigan's got black flies, got mosquitoes. Yep, hazard of astronomy. But nocturnal critters ranging from raccoons and opossums and skunks to deer to moose to wolves. That's a thing. I've observed with wolves in the background. It was a little bit nerve-wracking. Almost as nerve-wracking as when this little black and white guy crashed one of our observing sessions earlier this summer. So avoid critters, especially avoid making critters mad. Observe safety rules, keep comfortable, and then relax and have a good time. And most important, clear skies and happy observing. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be back at Astronomy at the Beach, and I will very happily entertain any questions. We've got any questions in the chat, John? Aha, I do see some questions coming up here. All right. Can you buy clear skies from Bob Tremblay? That is our outreach chairperson for the Warren Astronomical Society. In a manner of speaking, yes. Mary Teresa Aldani mentioned star hopping as a means of navigating the sky. Yes, of course, definitely. If we were doing a full scale beginners observational technique, star hopping is a huge way to learn the skies properly. Of course, binoculars are only a tool. You also have to put in the time with your star charts if you want to be old-fashioned about it, like me, or your app, to really, learn where everything is, the same way that you would learn a new city or anything else. Harmony Smurf says, I am such an avid binocular viewer that I use 2 eyepieces on my scope. That is an awesome way to do it. We have a binocular adapter at our observatory, and we have an 8-inch refractor in our club observatory, and an 8-inch refractor, the binocular eyepiece, and a really good planet like Saturn or Jupiter, you will swear that you are seeing in 3 dimensions. Very cool stuff. All right. Bob Tremblay agrees. And Bob went to Michigan Tech and has spent a lot of time in the UP. Too many stars. Yeah, you wouldn't think too many stars could be a thing, but they are. Open star clusters are my favorite in binocs, says John Panuto. Yeah, open star clusters, of course, the Pleiades and the Beehive are great examples of open star clusters. They are a wonderful thing to observe. Some other favorites of mine would be the Shoebuckle cluster and Gemini. There's a lovely little open cluster in Perseus that's not the double cluster. And there is the wild duck cluster in the constellation Scutum in the summer skies is just beautiful. All favorites to visit every year in my 15 by 70s. There are 2 southern sky objects from Michigan, of course. If you were in the southern hemisphere, they'd be northern sky. They're called M6 and M7. They're part of that Messier catalog. One is called the Butterfly Cluster, and the other one is called Ptolemy's Cluster, as it was observed by the Greek astronomer mathematician Ptolemy a very long time ago. Seeing those for the first time in London, Ontario in 2007, out in the outskirts of London where the skies were dark, out on Colonel Talbot Road, with my original long lost pair of 15 by 70s. Incredible experience. Just incredible. Joe Velez says, always attach the filter to the front of the binoculars. Yes. Jim Forrester asks, have you used a red dot finder? Not with binoculars. I have never yet used one with binoculars. Well, hopefully I have a few more observing years left in me, so we'll see. Dale Parton asks a great question. How do you hold the 15 times binoculars stable? So I first acquired the 15 by 70s when I was, I think, 27. My hands were a bit steadier at 27 than they are at 40. I understand that's not going to get any better. So that's one reason I am contemplating plopping down the investment in a parallel mount now, is because I was able to get by for years holding the binoculars in my hands. I do better in a chair these days with the 15 by 70s. And I'm sure eventually I will need the good mount in order to really get the most out of them. But they are lightweight. I have very small hands to the point where I have difficulty taking a CD out of a CD box or playing a Gibson guitar because the headstock is too thick. So I have small hands, but I was steady enough in my younger years that I had no problem at all with the 15 by 70. And yeah, those days are gone. Dajo Deward asks, what do you think about smartphone night sky apps? I don't use them. I don't even have them on my phone. Real reason is my phone is small and old and doesn't have the memory. But I I'm generally out observing with a partner who does have an app on the phone. So in the event that we need one, we refer to that. But honestly, I'm very invested on a philosophical level on using books, using star charts. We have special star chart readers. We have flashcards. Does it have its shortcomings? Yeah. Is that what I would recommend for beginners? No. For beginners, I would recommend go get whatever the free equivalent of Sky Safari is these days and use that. But I don't use them myself. Yeah, Jonathan says I use Sky Safari on Diane's behalf. Yes. When we have to refer to it, it's on Jonathan's phone. I had a freeware Sky app that I used when I was down in Hawaii by myself, and there were some Southern Sky things I wasn't super familiar with. It was trash. I deleted it. It just took up space. I'm not even going to say its name. It was trash. John Lyons calling in from Colorado. Did you mention to people in using star charts or apps? No, you did not miss anything. This is the only time I have really covered apps because, again, I don't use them. I learned the sky, the basics of the sky a very long time ago. And when I'm referring to things, it's usually for reference on some particular obscure object or something that in a neglected part of the sky, like, I don't know, Fornax, where I haven't paid it a lot of attention. So, but as far as the basic major constellations, Messier list and all that goes, yeah, I don't refer to things all that often. Though, as Jonathan can attest, I completely misremember where M15 was earlier this year, so that was a bit embarrassing. Any other questions, gang? Well, thank you very much. It has been great to see so many of you, especially those of you who've gone far afield there in the YouTube chat. I really super appreciated the chance to talk about one of my favorite soapboxes to astronomy at the beach. And so thank you, Bob, for inviting me. Thank you, Jeff and John, for the tech support. And thanks to all of you, including Adrian, for putting this incredible event on. And if y'all don't mind, I'm going to sign off. And I'm going to enjoy some of these things as a participant. So thank you very much again, everybody. Clear skies.